Happy Friday and welcome here to another edition of Husker Online Headlines. Sean Callahan, Robin Washett, as Steven Sipple still on his way back from the big NBA trip. And before we get into today's show, Husker Online Headlines brought to you now by our Friday title sponsor, StayHome.Care. We've been telling you all about StayHome.Care. They're there for you to help the loved ones in your life with the simple tasks you need. You might be grocery shopping, a ride to a doctor's appointment, cooking, cleaning. They are there to assist the loved ones in your life. It's never too early to call them to learn more about their services. They're an award-winning company. Call them at 402-205-2233. That's 402-205-2233. Thanks to StayHome.Care for being the title sponsor here of Husker Online Headlines. But let's get into headline number one. And we're going to be joined later here in our next headline by former Husker CJ Zimmerer, who was one of the key people kind of in the Team Jack Nebraska relationship along with Rex Burkhead. But let's get into headline one, remembering the life of Jack Hoffman and just what he's meant, Robin, to Nebraska over the years. I mean, you go back to Jack Hoffman in that moment, 2012. They initiated the contact with Rex Burkhead. He was battling brain cancer. Rex Burkhead was rehabbing at that time. Rex Burkhead started to wear a Team Jack bracelet. The next thing you know, T-shirts were made. Everybody in Nebraska had the Team Jack T-shirts. They were behind this young man. And then in 2012, I believe that was the year he also did the tunnel walk with the team before the Wisconsin game. And then obviously the special moment was the spring of 2013, where he ran the touchdown play in the spring game, which was the 2013 ESPN SB sports moment of the year. And arguably, Robin, one of the biggest moments we've seen with Nebraska football in terms of the recognition it got over that time.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think around here, obviously, Jack Hoffman was a Nebraska icon, just with his platform that he was able to take on within the football team. But then the way the entire athletic department braced him and the cause for the Team Jack Foundation and their research towards pediatric cancer. And so locally, it was always a big story. But what really struck me was after the news got out that Jack had passed away, was just the national attention that received. And I know it goes back to that spring game run, but I mean, you're talking about multiple national level athletes, media personalities, people just across the board that all had a connection in one way or another to that moment, to what Jack represented on that spring game day, and then also for the next decade since, and just the fight that he kind of embodied for a cause that really, as you see, affects so many people on so many different levels. So that was what really kind of hit me was, obviously he's an iconic figure here around Nebraska, but just the national reach that he had. And when that news broke, the amount of people from across the country that poured in their support was really unbelievable.
Well, I think what a lot of people don't realize is there wasn't a lot of fundraising or awareness for pediatric brain cancer until Team Jack came out. So there you see Jack Hoffman meeting former President Barack Obama. I mean, you're right. I mean, he was everywhere that year, but the main thing they were doing was representing the cause of pediatric brain cancer to raise awareness and fundraising, and they have raised millions of dollars. And I can remember talking to Andy Hoffman about this, and he was a go-getter. I mean, I truly believe Andy Hoffman, and tragically he passed away a little over a year ago from something very similar. But I truly believed Andy Hoffman was going to be a political figure. I mean, he had been really out and about doing so much speaking and awareness for what they were doing. And he was blown away by how little there was for pediatric brain cancer, which his son was battling. So they made it their cause to raise awareness because of the platform they were able to build with what Nebraska football and the relationship they had that went back to 2012.
Mm-hmm. And again, I think that it speaks to just the importance that family had, not just for the storyline of their own fight, but kind of what they represented and how so many people identified with what they were going through. That pediatric brain cancer was something that was much more widespread, and that there's a lot of people, whether you knew about it or not, that had been impacted by it to some degree. And so to have kind of a figurehead for that movement and really push that issue to the forefront and raise the awareness to the level that they did, and the funding that they were able to generate to help so many kids that were going through the same thing that Jack was, you just can't say enough about it. And again, there's a reason that whether you met Jack and his family or not, I feel like everybody around Nebraska and again around the country can relate to him and have some sort of connection to what he and that family represented.
Yeah, and just, I mean, there are a lot of fundraising causes and people try to get awareness, but this one just took on a life of its own, one that I can't ever remember, especially locally in Nebraska, what they were able to do. And, the funeral services for Jack Hoffman are going to be in Atkinson, Nebraska, his hometown. Those will be on Saturday. And then on Friday is the visitation here. So there's quite a schedule of things ahead for Jack Hoffman. And I expect a lot of people to be back. I've been to Atkinson several times. My grandmother's from there. So it's not an easy place to get to. But I do think you're going to see a lot of people there. I would assume Bo Pelini is going to make his way out there. It's just, what's going on for people. Can they get out to that part of Nebraska? Because it's, once you land in Omaha or Lincoln, it's another 4-hour drive.
Yeah, and I mean, this is one of those situations though that if they can make it, they will. Because of the importance and the significance that again Jack had to so many different people, that he touched a lot of people over the last 13 years of his connection to the University of Nebraska and the athletic department here. So I think that you'll see plenty of notable Husker names making their way to Atkinson this weekend.
And as we take it to headline number 2, one of those notable former Husker names that will be in Atkinson, in fact, he's en route to Atkinson right now, is former Husker fullback CJ Zimmerer, who was really, along with Rex Burkhead, at the very beginning of the Team Jack movement and the fundraising. They helped create the fun run to help raise money for Team Jack. Let's bring in CJ Zimmerer as you're viewing the Husker Online headline show, brought to you by our title sponsor, StayHome.Care. And CJ, we appreciate you pulling off. Whereabouts are you? On your way up to Atkinson right now?
Yeah, I'm pulled over in West Point right now, so I still got about a solid 2-hour drive. But the sun is shining, and it's a decent day to be out on the road. So,
well, we talked, CJ, about a year ago about Jack Hoffman and Rex Burkhead and what you guys did at that time. What do you remember about that period where this little boy came into the Nebraska football program and everybody, not just the football program, but by the entire state, got behind his cause and effort, and you guys raised millions of dollars. I mean, help raise millions of dollars for their cause and what they've been fighting for.
Yeah, the Husker Life Skills program does a really good job of exposing you to opportunities to do things like this. But I had never really experienced that personal outreach like Rex started with Jack. We had been to hospitals on Thanksgiving and done those different events, but when Rex brought Jack in to the team and to practice and things like that, you finally got to really get to know the family and the kid and really dive in and put all your eggs in that basket. And that's why I think it's been so successful, that one-on-one that Rex created then blossomed into the Hoffmans and the team, and then the Hoffmans and the team and the whole community and the whole state. And it's just grown exponentially because of that homegrown family feel, I think. So I tell everybody who talks to me about this, the touchdown run was by far my best memory from being in Lincoln. And so cool to, I've been on the news and a couple things recently because of Jack's passing, and what a crappy reason to be on a show or to be on a TV. But what a cool experience to relive this again now over 10 years ago and share it with my kids and my coworkers and people who maybe have forgotten about it after so long now.
CJ, you mentioned that spring game run. Obviously that was kind of the pinnacle of the Jack Hoffman connection to Nebraska. I'm sure he's told the story 1,000 times, but it never gets old. Can you just kind of run through how that evolved, and then maybe just run us through a play-by-play of that unforgettable touchdown of his?
Yeah, so Rex had finished his senior year with us, and he was moving on to the NFL, so he was kind of around but not as much. So I had kind of taken the the reins of being the liaison, to the Team Jack stuff. And, Sean mentioned the fun run that we created there on campus. So, Coach Jamrog reached out to me the night before the spring game and said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" So my first call was to Rex, talking back and forth with him. And then, we went into that Saturday spring game not really knowing what it would look like. We knew we were going to try to get him on the field and, some point in the game. And, Coach Bo gave the green light. I said this to a newscast the other day, just the ability for us to say yes was always an opportunity to do these type of things. Coach Bo never turned us down, Coach Jamrog, all the other life skills people. So we had a good opportunity, and, we got him in there at the end of the spring game. And, the rest is history. We got him on the field and he goes the wrong way, and Taylor ushers him back. And then before you know it, you got both sides of the sidelines are on the field and running. And, I'm still getting, the hairs are standing up on my arms every time I tell the story. Not a lot of times in your life can you be in a moment and you just know it's going to be something big. As I was running there behind him, you just hear the crowd, you feel the crowd, and, to get in the end zone and pick him up on our shoulders. And just what an amazing, amazing experience. And it's done so much for, their fundraising opportunities. He went to the ESPYs, he met the president, and, he took full advantage of a really crappy situation. What a great lesson it is for all of us to just take advantage of every opportunity you have. So,
CJ, I think what made that moment so special was it was organic. It wasn't really staged. I mean, I think we've seen other places kind of try to duplicate a moment like that. And if everybody knows it's coming, it doesn't have the same feel. And I think what made that day so special was it just kind of like in typical Bo fashion, it just was like, okay, do it. And like nobody really knew. But I think that's what made it great, because nobody was like staging it or preparing that moment. And then Jack gets up there on that stage. I mean, I have kids now that old, and I can't imagine a 7-8-year-old on that stage,
mhm.
just keeping their composure in that moment and doing what he did that day.
Yeah, if you tried to do it again, you definitely couldn't have the effect that it did, because like you said, it's just so unplanned. Our plan was get him on the field and kind of see what happens. I remember Coach Beck drew up a play, from our playbook. He said, "All right, linemen, let's do this." And, Jack just took the ball and took off. Some kids might have just stopped, might have got a first down and stopped, or, just kind of looked around in awe, but he took off and made it all the way down the field. So I agree. It's a great opportunity. And I hope that college athletes, now they have so much opportunity to be exposed, to get exposure out there on different things that they believe in. There's really no restriction on what they can say online. And I hope that they take opportunities to do things like this, because they do have the ear of, millions of people on their social media stuff. And it can be used for a lot of good. Sometimes it's not, but it definitely can be.
We're joined here by former Husker CJ Zimmerer. I know it's you talked to a lot of your teammates and maybe coaches. Got an idea of like anybody? I mean, how many guys do you sense we making their way up to Atkinson here for either the Friday visitation or the funeral on Saturday?
Yeah, I haven't talked to too many guys. I definitely talked with Rex. I know he plans to be there for for obvious reasons, but I expect to see quite a bit of people from the university, whether that be coaches, players, or administrators. Again, it just has had such a profound ripple effect that one Saturday, in 2013, that the team now, where I don't know any players, I don't know any coaches down there anymore. I've been out for over 10 years. They're still doing the fun run. They're still doing events that are tied to Team Jack, and it's there to stay, and it's definitely part of the university now. So I know the family will get a lot of support from everybody around the program.
Sorry, CJ. I know you mentioned just how Jack's fight, the lessons that you can take away from that in your own life. How has your relationship with him and his family maybe just changed the way that you kind of approach life, and then taught you lessons about, how to handle adversity and difficult things in your own path?
Yeah, I'm a father of 3, and it's very easy to be impatient with your kids and wanna be upset about just the little things that kids do. And, especially this week after Jack passed, it's like, it's really not that big of a deal. Things could be much worse. Somebody always has it worse than you do. So it's just a great perspective to, again, take advantage of opportunities, make every moment like it might be your last, because you don't know. And then just the fight. I hope my kids, as I retell these stories and show my kids the videos and things like that, and that they learn that no matter what's happening, you got to keep trying. You got to keep pushing, because the person next to you might need that, or they might be watching what you're doing. And Jack's inspired so many kids that have gone through similar things that he is, and so many little things too that kids can take this lesson and run with it.
Well, CJ, we appreciate you taking some time and pulling off here on the way up to Atkinson, and our condolences to you as well, because we know how much Jack and his father Andy both meant to you in the relationship you had. So we appreciate you taking some time to join us. Thanks, CJ.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, CJ.
All right. Thanks again to former Husker fullback CJ Zimmerer for joining us here on Husker Online Headlines. Again, Husker Online Headlines brought to you by our title sponsor, StayHome.Care. They're there for you, for the loved ones in your life. Give them a call at 402-205-2233 to learn more about their services. And we're also brought to you by Crani-Yum. And if you're not familiar, Robin and I are both drinking a Crani-Yum energy drink, because for Robin last night, he had a late night at PBA, had a basketball game. I was in Omaha at Holy Ghost speaking. So late night, and you need a little bit of a boost. And Crani-Yum is an elite energy drink founded by two lifelong Nebraskans, Husker fans. It's based out of Fremont, and it's healthy in a lot of respects. It's a unique type of energy drink, highly dosed nootropics to enhance your mental clarity, focus. It's only 150 milligrams of naturally sourced caffeine, sugar-free, no artificial colors, making it a healthy alternative to most other energy drinks on the market. They've got 3 different flavors, and you can find it at most of your Eastern Nebraska Hy-Vees in the health market. We've had a lot of users and listeners tell us they've gone to Hy-Vee and tried it. They like the Crani-Yum drink, so thank you for that feedback. If you want to order it, you can also go to their website. Visit them at Crani-Yum.com. That's CRANI yum.com, and use the promo code HuskerOnline, and you'll receive 10% off your order of Crani-Yum. Thank you to Crani-Yum Energy Drink for sponsoring us here on Husker Online Headlines. But Robin, let's go into headline number 3. And this is another one, NIL related one I wanted to get to. NCAA athlete NIL pay must be Title IX compliant, the Department of Education says. And, that dropped. It was kind of a 5:00 Thursday news dump when that hit the wires yesterday. That the Department of Education in its final days of President Joe Biden's administration kind of dropped that down, and it really put up a lot of questions like, whoa, what does this mean? And what they're trying to say they want it to be is that essentially NIL revenue share payment is going to have to be equal for all sports, and football and basketball and volleyball can't get a majority of it, which that's how it's going to go. I don't think this is going to stick. Especially with Donald Trump coming in the office Monday. He could zap this whole thing with one executive order, or do some things behind the scenes with the Senate and the Congress to get this done. But definitely an interesting flex, or an attempt of a flex by the Department of Education.
Yeah, and I don't really understand it, because they had to have known that something like this would be immediately met with appeals and lawsuits and all that, because universities have already budgeted their athletic department distribution for this money, and it's no surprise football is going to get most of it. You know why? Because the reason there is revenue sharing is because of football. It's not because of even men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball, or anything. It is a football driven issue, and until they have women's football teams, I don't understand how you can say that some sport deserves as much money as football does, because football is its own animal. Even, again, not even from men's to women's sports, from men's to men's sports. That makes this a conversation where you can't apply the Title IX blanket to it, because it's such a unique deal. So whether it's through the courts or through the next presidential administration or whatever it is. I don't see this thing lasting very much longer.
The complicated thing is revenue sharing really is not NIL. Revenue
Right.
sharing is football television money being so great that the athletes deserve a piece of it. So they're giving the athletes a piece of it. And that's what they're trying to argue. I thought, and I don't want to get too political here, but Senator Ted Cruz had a great statement about this. This is a great idea if Biden's intent is to kill both men's and women's college sports. Mandating so-called equal pay when not all sports generate equal revenue will force some colleges out of athletics altogether. Everyone wants to be paid like Michael Jordan, but that's not the way the world works. I predict this scheme will die on January 20th, and that came from Senator Ted Cruz in a statement on Friday. Is Senator Cruz a Texas senator, obviously highly tied into the sports world in the state of Texas? Came out with that, and I tend to agree, and I think a lot of people do when you hear him say it like that, because that's what it is. I mean, if they would go through with this, I don't think these people understand the ramifications it would have and how many athletes would actually lose opportunities because of it.
Yeah, and again, I think that there's plenty of reason to continue to push for Title IX and create a fair and balanced situation in college sports. But again, I just don't think this applies at all. This is, again, football is it's such a unique conversation because this is an entirely football driven situation that you can't apply other sports to under this same umbrella just because this is the reason that we're having this movement in college athletics is because of football and power conference football. So again, this is probably just something that for the week is going to generate some headlines, but I don't anticipate this being any sort of long-term thing that people are going to have to deal with.
Yeah, I just wonder why they even chose to come
strange.
out. Just a weird flex, because the car is already so far down the road.
Exactly.
And how this $20.5 million is expected to be divvied up. I mean, we expect Nebraska football to get around 14 to 15. We expect men's basketball to get 2 or 3 million. I would expect volleyball and women's basketball to be around $1 million or in that range. And then the rest of the sports, the money will be divided up. So be it. I would assume baseball is going to get a small portion of that. But the other thing is NIL still can exist. So you can have the rev share dollars, which is the TV money essentially, but there will still be collectives. There will still be NIL, and that will still be a separator in all of this because that's what NIL was meant to be from the get-go. It was supposed to be athletes being able to have their own podcast and do a burrito commercial. It wasn't ever meant to be kind of what it's become, but it got highly organized and structured to where we're at today.
Yeah, and again, I think that there's ways to still maintain the balanced landscape that Title IX is intended to try to create without trying to disrupt something that, like you said, is already so far along in motion that with this rev sharing, where teams have schools have in many cases budgeted for the next fiscal year about how they're going to allocate that money, and they're talking about 75% roughly going to football. Usually across the board, at least at schools like Nebraska. So to suddenly say, nope, you got to refigure everything and pay women's track as much as you do football. Good luck with that.
Yeah, it's not going to stick. Think about the beginning of NIL, just some of the crazy endorsements that we don't even see. I remember Casey Rogers did like a pet sitting tweet for some company. And then I can also remember Runza, like that opening week, they set up this big campaign probably through Open Doors, where if you made like a tweet as an athlete to download their app, every one of those athletes got like a $25 or $50 gift card to Runza. I mean, when you think about what NIL is now, it's so far from that.
Yep. No more off court with the McGowan shows on HuskerOnline. Those were the glory days of NIL.
Hey, we got in there at the beginning. We had 20
strike of midnight.
I think it was 25 or 26 episodes with the McGowans, and I did at least 12 or 14 with JoJo Doman. So we launched. There are no more shows. You don't see that anymore anywhere, do you?
No need for that anymore.
All right. Well, let's take it before we go to headline number 4. Again, Husker headlines brought to you by our title sponsor, StayHome.Care. They are there for you to help the loved ones in your life with the simple tasks, the day-to-day things you might need, cooking, cleaning, whatever it is. Give them a call at 402-205-2233. Thanks to StayHome.Care for being the title sponsor of the Husker Online Headline Show. Okay, headline 4, Robin, and this is where you were at last night. I watched it on TV. I wasn't able to get to the arena, but Nebraska falls 85-82. It was their first Big Ten home loss in over 600 days, and it was their first home loss in over a year. They went into the game, I believe, a 9.5-point favorite, but that was not that Rutgers team. This Rutgers team was as loaded as they've been and probably played arguably their best game of the season against Nebraska.
Yeah, so when Rutgers kind of was going through it, they played 4 games without Dylan Harper, who is one of the 2 or 3 projected top 5 picks, along with Ace Bailey. And so, they weren't at full strength, and they're a team that are built around 2 guys. And when one of those guys is not in the equation, they're inherently going to struggle. Well, since his return, Rutgers has been on a different level. They handled a win against UCLA, which, UCLA is going through their own struggles, but that kind of got them back on track. So they came to Lincoln with a lot more confidence and a lot more swagger than I think, many people expected, myself included. I thought Nebraska was going to win by double digits just because of the importance of that game, their own kind of desperation after 2 straight road losses, and the fact that they'd won 20 straight games, including 12 straight Big Ten games in that arena. And they were 1 win away from setting the program record for consecutive home victories. And so all those things combined, I thought this was going to be one where Nebraska took care of business. But every time they tried to make a run, Rutgers had an answer. And Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper were every bit as advertised. They both had 20 points apiece, including some really tough, just men shots down the stretch when that game was really in the balance. And you got to give your hats off to great players making great plays, but this is a situation now for Nebraska where they're reeling right as much as they have all season. Obviously 3 straight losses, but then losing a game of that significance on your home floor in that fashion is concerning, and it starts with the defense. You gave up 85 points to a bunch of freshmen on your home arena when everything was on the line for you. The 3-point defense continues to struggle. Over the last 3 games, they've allowed 48 made 3-pointers, which is a 16 per game. 16 made threes per game. And I don't care who you are. You're not going to have much of a chance to beat anybody letting teams just have their way in a 3-point contest every single night. So Rutgers, was a mediocre shooting team. And once again, Nebraska's struggles with their defensive intensity and consistency led to far too many open shots. And Rutgers is the type of team that has the star power to beat you when given that opportunity.
There were a lot of little moments in that game that became big. There was one, I believe they were up by 1 and late, and they fouled by mistake Braxton Mia. It wasn't like I don't think they were trying to foul him, but that was like a great strategy. Mm-hmm. It took away the possession by Nebraska. It forced by far the Huskers' worst free throw shooter to shoot 2 and a double bonus. He didn't even come close to making either one. Mm-hmm. And that took away a key possession, in my opinion, that Nebraska, if they would have ran a set out of that and scored, maybe they win the game. I mean, there was moments like that 5 or 6 times in that game where you're like, if this would have happened, they would win this game. Sure. And they came up short in all of them.
Yeah, it's a lot like the Iowa game where if they just do a couple things better or execute things, the way that they're capable of doing, then they probably win that game, but they didn't. And so now, you have another instance where you look back, it's like, well, we missed 10 free throws in a 3-point loss. They only had 7 turnovers, but the timeliness of some of those giveaways were unforced errors, dribbling the ball out of bounds or whatever it may be. Those are the types of games that get you beat, especially this time of year in Big Ten conference play. And so Nebraska's got kind of a look in the mirror type moment as they try to figure out what's going on and how to get this thing back on track. But for me, again, it just always goes back to defense. This is a team that has self-identified itself as a gritty, defensive-minded team that when they win, it will be through playing elite level defense for 40 minutes. Well, we have not seen that for the last 2.5 games. Basically, since the 15-minute mark at Iowa, this team has played its worst defense of the season from that point on. And if you're going to try to go to Maryland or beat a USC team that's playing a lot better than they were earlier in the year, or go to a top 25 Wisconsin team coming up, the only way Nebraska will stand a chance is if they defend at the level that they had been when they were really clicking just maybe about a month ago.
Well, and they would force maybe an initial miss, and then it was the rebounds that were killing them.
Yeah.
They might force a jump shot miss or what you'd maybe consider a bad shot by Rutgers. Then they would miss the rebound though. And
17 offensive rebounds for 19 or 20 second chance points. And Nebraska had more offensive rebounds and more second chance points, but their inability to finish possession. So even when they did defend well and force a miss, they just kept giving Rutgers one chance after another. And again, they're too good. Their talent was too good to give that many opportunities to. Freshmen or not, Rutgers shown that they've grown up quite a bit since the beginning of the season. And when Nebraska continues to give opportunity after opportunity with their slow closeouts and the open shots they give out, and then when that Rutgers would miss, they couldn't finish the possessions with rebounds. That's when you give up 85 points and allow a team to shoot 40% from three.
And now they head out to Maryland, and it's a quick turn. Nebraska will go Thursday night at 8:00 tip to a Sunday morning 11 a.m. Central tip. I mean, that in the world of a Big Ten schedule, that's about as quick of a turnaround, which it could be a good thing or a bad thing for this team.
Yeah, Fred, after the game, said that he liked the quick turnaround just because, what you worry about, especially after 3 losses in the manner in which these 3 have happened, you worry about guys starting to feel sorry for themselves and, have doubt kind of creep over about, are we actually good? And, what are we going to do? When you don't have enough time to think about that sort of stuff, sometimes it's for the better. Just getting back on the floor sometimes can be the best remedy. But, again, they're flying halfway across the country on an extremely short turnaround. Fatigue might be some sort of issue to deal with there. But then also Maryland, they're one of those Big Ten teams that plays significantly better on their home floor than they do on the road. And so this is going to be another daunting challenge for them that, for Nebraska team that, again, continues to struggle trying to win away from their home gym in league play. So they got a lot of work to do, but I think that there's still reasons for optimism that, despite the Purdue game withstanding, Nebraska had every opportunity to win 2 of the last 3. And if they can just figure out how to step up their level of intensity defensively, make their free throws, and then find a way to just finish plays and make the winning plays in the most important times, they can have a chance to win these types of games. But right now, they're just not making those plays nearly at the level they need to be.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that probably won't be a real daunting arena environment. I know Nebraska's played out there before on these Sunday 11 a.m. type games, and the place is half full. And I would imagine it's not going to be a packed gymnasium, even though Maryland's played better this year. But Nebraska's kind of lucked out when they play at Maryland. It doesn't generally end up being a heavy student game or a daunting atmosphere.
Yeah, it usually isn't. So you never know what the situations when their students are locked in. That's as good of a student section as there is in the conference. But Nebraska's played out there in the COVID year when there was nobody in the gym and lost by 20. So as Mick Cronin would say, home environment doesn't mean anything. And for Nebraska, it doesn't matter about the crowd. It doesn't matter really even about the opponent right now. Their issues are internal. And until they start doing the things necessary for them to be competitive in these types of games, it doesn't matter who's lined up across from them. They're going to have some problems.
All right. Before we go to headline number 5, Husker Headlines, again, brought to you by a title sponsor, StayHome.Care. They're there for you to help the loved ones in your life. Give them a call to learn more about their services at 402-205-2233. Thanks to StayHome.Care for being the title sponsor of Husker Online Headlines. All right, headline 5, as we always do with Sip and I, odds and ends. So we're going to cover a lot of ground, Robin, a lot of different things. First and foremost, as of show taping Friday afternoon, no visitors scheduled for Nebraska in terms of the portal. And a lot of it is, they've spent a lot of money in the portal, Nebraska. And B, there's not as many good players left. So the ones that are left that you might want are highly sought after and obviously come with a big price tag. And for the right player, Nebraska's obviously willing to do what it takes. But as of right now, no offensive linemen visitors, no visitors coming in this weekend.
It sounds like you're not stunned by that. But would you have expected to see guys, especially with classes starting back up here?
Like last year at this time, they did bring in a couple of visitors, but again, it's what do you need and what's available, and what they need are offensive linemen, and the couple of guys they might want are really, really sought after. One of the guys is committed or is at North Carolina right now from Troy, an offensive lineman. And then there's a Michigan offensive lineman I know that's on the radar. But as of right now, no visitors coming in for the Huskers. And the names of those two, I'll give you those names here. Sorry, I kind of have portal name fatigue here, so I need to.
No, I get it.
Daniel King from Troy is the offensive lineman, 2,600 career snaps. He's at North Carolina visiting Bill Belichick. And, there's a Michigan lineman, Jeffrey Percy, who's been mentioned, a 6'8", 310 tackle, but no visit. I mean, there's no visit as of right now set up for Daniel King or Jeffrey Percy from Michigan. So we'll see where that goes. But, Nebraska already has 16 portal commits. It's not like they don't have a lot. They have the most they've ever had in history.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like but you kind of get greedy at this point. You want everybody.
Right. And so, I mean, what kind of is the timeline here for like when maybe you should start to get a little nervous about just the remaining needs left in what they needed to get in the portal? I mean, because there's probably going to be another round even after spring.
Yeah,
right?
There'll be another round, but it's really hard to get a guy after spring ready to go at certain positions. But you still technically have all next week still, because you can enroll 5 days into the semester, 5 class days, and they start school on Tuesday. So there is always a chance they could slip somebody in still late. But, it's as every day goes on, it's more and more unlikely. Then that spring window traditionally has not been a great window. I mean, usually the good dudes are already where they want to be and locked in. And if there are really good players in the spring, everybody's on that like name or two. So, that's why the beginning is important. And Nebraska did a great job. You would like to see them get one more really good offensive lineman, though.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to cost a lot of money, though. That's the other thing. But meanwhile, the coaches are on the road and they're seeing high school recruits. So it is different this year with coaches on the road. Assistant coaches can do in-home visits with juniors. That's never happened before. There's Matt Rule, and he's out in St. Louis here at Desmet Jesuit, at an early in-home visit. But yeah, they're out on the road right now. Matt Rule is allowed to see a player one time in January. It has to be at the school. Assistant coaches can see a player twice in January. So that's really what you want to zone in on. Who is Nebraska going out to see in person? You're not going to see now in this new recruiting model, Robin, as many goodwill visits. It's more VIP meetings. And that's Jace Reynolds from Elkhorn North, who's one of probably 2 really priority in-state offers for 2026. Isaac Jensen being the other at Millard South. And Matt Rule made the rounds in Omaha yesterday. He was at Millard West, Millard South. He was at Westside. I believe he was at Omaha Central, and he was at Elkhorn North making the rounds. But it's a different strategy now compared to, the old days of having like Ed Foley go to 40 in-state schools. You're not really seeing that model anymore in recruiting.
I think it's good, though, that you're still seeing Nebraska prioritize in-state to where, Matt Rule's first kind of round of trips is up in Omaha just to see some local prospects. And so while the landscape of recruiting continues to change, and like you said, it's just a different kind of approach you have to take now, the board, securing the border still remains a top priority. And I think that's good news for a lot of Nebraska fans to see.
And transitioning here on odds and ends, unfortunately the men, as we talked about, lost, but how about Nebraska women, Ramen? Amy Williams' squad, Alexis Markowski, Brett Prince, they beat Iowa in overtime in Iowa City. Just a huge win. I wasn't able to watch the game, but it sounded like both Markowski and Prince were huge. Yeah,
Britt Prince grew up in a big way, hit 5 of 11 from 3-point range, 22 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, including a dagger 3 towards the end, final minute of regulation to tie it up. She's been a star since the first time I ever saw her play in high school at the state tournament. And you're starting to see her really come into her own now at the next level at Nebraska. And so when you want to look at like who the next face of Nebraska basketball, Britt Prince is rapidly rising to that title.
It's hard to believe Markowski's already a senior.
I know.
I mean, she's been here for a long time, but it's coming to an end here quickly. But this team, even through the injury adversity, they're on track to make the tournament.
Yeah, 14-4, 5-2 in the league. And, going to Iowa, I know Iowa's not what they were in the Caitlin Clark era, but they're still good. And that's still an extremely difficult place to win, just because the Iowa women's basketball is such a big deal over there, and the crowd support. That's a tough environment. And so Nebraska, I think, showed a lot that, they're a legitimate contender in the Big Ten Conference, and winning that type of game in that type of fashion, I think says volumes about what this group's all about.
Yeah, the two West Coast teams, UCLA and USC, though, they're the real deal.
Yes,
I mean, they're two women's basketball teams.
They're some of the best in the country, period.
So, but Nebraska is kind of in that second tier, pushing their way up to be, a better seed in the tournament, and we'll see if it can continue. And then I want to hit on Nebraska wrestling. Mark Manning has challenged Nebraska fans on Friday night to fill up Bob Devaney. Number 1 ranked Penn State comes in. Husker wrestling got a huge win on Saturday this week against Minnesota. Minnesota was ranked 6th and Nebraska was ranked 9th. They won that duel. Now they'll have number 1 ranked Penn State. And this is kind of one of those ones where you could fill it up, but Penn State's still Penn State.
Yeah, I mean,
it could be
they're
hard.
the number 1 team in the country for a reason. I mean, they're absolutely loaded. They're a juggernaut of a program. And so, yes, there's a reason Mark Manning's calling for a record-setting crowd, because they're going to need every bit of it. This is one of those matchups where, Nebraska's just going to try to keep this thing close, just because Penn State is on such a different level. But this is kind of a barometer here to just see how big that gap is between a team that's ranked 5th nationally. How far away is 1 from 5? I think Nebraska is going to try to prove a point that while they might not win this thing, that gap might not be as wide as some people might think.
Well, a lot of it is how close can they keep some of these matches, because obviously you get more points for a pin or a major decision in a wrestling duel. So can they keep a few of these matches closer, and can they win some? I mean, you have 10 matches. How many of the 10 can Nebraska theoretically win? It's going to be hard. I've once talked to Mark Manning and some other wrestling folks, and teams like Penn State and Iowa, they essentially get the pick of who they want first, and that's how wrestling works in a lot of respects.
Mm-hmm. Some great individual matchups. I'm just looking at the kind of the lineup here, and 141 pounds, Bo Bartlett, who's number 3 nationally, versus Brock Hardy, who's number 6. Shane Van Ness versus Nebraska's Rich Lovett, number 2 versus number 4. Number 3, Tyler Kastick versus number 5, Antrell Taylor. So, I mean, just top 5 pairings across the lineup sheet here. So it should be, if you're a wrestling fan, it should be an excellent night at the Bob.
All right, here, and then let's go into finally number 5. In our odds and ends, our last take, the players move back this weekend. So the early enrollees officially move in. We got to see some of them at the bowl practices, but it is officially get back to work time Sunday, Monday. You'll start to see people kind of trickling in. I'm sure you'll see a lot of postings and pictures of the players getting back and meeting with Matt Rule, as it's back to work here for year number 3 of Matt Rule.
So what's the schedule like? When do mat drills start? And I guess when does the actual team stuff?
Well,
workout
they haven't said the official start of mat drills, but generally you do a couple of weeks of workouts. You don't just go
into it. Yeah.
Like, you don't just start mat drills Tuesday. I mean, that's not smart. You want to make sure you're kind of prepared. So I would imagine a week or 2 later on. But the dates that I have right now is spring practice would start the week of March 24th.
Okay.
And more than likely the red-white spring game is going to be on April 26th.
Okay.
So those are the early dates I know. None of it's been published or official. It can always change. And they can move spring maybe a week later. But that's at least the tentative dates I've heard. So that's the timeline. I mean, for these players, now they get back to work here and they have 4 or 5 months more of hard work before they get a break. And then they come back and do it again for the summer.
Gosh, we're almost 2 months away from spring ball.
I'm already geared up to go to Kansas City.
I know. We were talking on the phone the other day, just going through all the trips that we got coming up this season, and it's going to be awesome. What an awesome slate of travel with Kansas City, Penn State,
Washington, D.C.,
and that goes with on the
we could. I mean, we could do Maryland one of 2 ways: fly into D.C. like we've done before, stay at the Marriott on campus. You could also stay in Baltimore, but I don't know if Baltimore does a whole lot.
No, I'm okay with that. I didn't mind the trip last time. We had a good time.
Yeah. No,
that was the first time I'd ever been to Washington, D.C. So actually getting out and seeing all that sort of stuff was pretty cool.
You ventured into the city?
I did. Met up with a friend of mine and got to get the brief express tour. Didn't like go into anything, but we saw the monuments and the Capitol and all that sort of stuff. So I'm looking forward to that trip. When was the last time we were there? 18, 19? 19.
It was raining.
Yep, it was raining.
And it was a blowout. It was Mike Loxley.
Yeah,
Mike Loxley, did he interview for the Bears job or what?
Jets.
Jets job.
Jets. And they're like, he's like one of like 50 interviews they've had so far. So we'll
must
see.
have a good agent. Deion to the Cowboys. What's your percentage of that happening?
I would be surprised. I would almost say like Kellen Moore might be the favorite there. He just interviewed the former Cowboys OC, currently with the Eagles, their offensive coordinator. I think I know Jerry loves him, so that would make a lot of sense. And I just don't know how the Jerry Jones, Deion Sanders dynamic would go, because those are two extremely hands-on alpha personalities that I don't know if they could coexist in the same building, even in Jerry world.
In the NFL too, you don't really want your coach to be a draw attention to himself figure.
You don't. It usually doesn't end well.
Like, think about Andy Reid, how simple he is. Like, he just wears a Hawaiian shirts and hangs out with his grandkids and draws up the best plays in football.
Yeah, and like, is Deion going to take a job with the expectation to take Shador? Like, is that something Cowboys are already paying a bunch of money to their quarterback right now? So I don't know. I guess nothing would surprise me, just given that fact that it's Jerry Jones and he's about as unpredictable as it gets, but I would be surprised.
Could they trade Shador, or not Shador, but could they trade Dak Prescott to Tennessee and then get the number 1 pick to get Shador in Dallas?
Well, I guess, does Tennessee want to take on that contract, and do they like Dak Prescott enough to give up the number 1 pick to get him? I don't know. I just expect there'd probably be a lot more with that trade than just Dak for number 1.
Tennessee's a mess. Like, they are really. I was listening to one of their writers or media members talk about their roster, and they essentially have no star power at all on that roster. Like, that they have like one good D lineman that's like probably the 3rd or 4th
Jeffrey Simmons,
best player at his position in the league, and that's it.
And to think that was a team that had A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry on the same offense and just refused to go get a quarterback, thought that Ryan Tannehill was going to be the answer. And look at him now.
Yeah, you're not
first overall.
You're not beating the Ravens, Bills, and Chiefs with those guys.
Nope. And, as a Giants fan, I have very little room to talk about any failures of any other NFL team. So I'll stop my criticisms there.
All right. Well, we get NFL playoffs all weekend, Nebraska basketball on Sunday as well. And Sip will be back from his big NBA trip. We'll hear all about his adventures in Oklahoma City.
There's stories.
I'm sure he had some seedy Sipple type moments that we'll get to hear all about on Monday with gas stations and hotel workers and housekeepers, everybody. We'll get the whole story from Sipple.
I'll bet you they had an awesome time. I'm looking forward to hearing all about it.
He told me, this is on brand Sipple. He called me on the day of the game and they went to lunch. He's like, "Where are you guys going?" He goes, "Oh, we have a reservation to the old spaghetti factory." I'm like, "You have a reservation?
They take reservations?
You have a reservation at the old spaghetti factory?" It's like going to Spaghetti Works in Ralston. I mean,
the finest Italian Bricktown has to offer.
So they did it up at the old spaghetti factory.
Boy.
I've ate there. It's not bad.
It's fine.
It's
fine.
Totally Sipple.
Yes.
All right. Well, have a great weekend. For Robin Washut, I'm Sean Callahan signing off for Husker Online Headlines.